Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out today on this beautiful day. It feels like we're finally getting to a point where we're going to see spring, so that's exciting for everyone. Just a little housekeeping. We will be recording this video, and there will be a time for question and answer, so we can, if we do that write your question into the chat, we'll take them that way, or we can open it up a little bit later. I'm really excited about what this Englewood Leadership Exchange is becoming. As many of you know, it is a new program that the Chamber is putting together, but it's exciting to hear about new ideas that are happening in other communities and other cities. And today is no different, so I'm really excited for our speakers. But to kick it off for us, I wanted to introduce our chair of the Englewood Leadership Exchange, Christine Adams. Christine, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Christine Adams. I'm the chair of the Englewood Leadership Exchange. I'll give my little spiel and then I'll introduce our speakers for the evening. So I live in Englewood, but I work in Denver and I work in government, so I don't work in business, but I care about Englewood. I am loyal to our small Englewood business community, and I wanted to find a way to be able to give back. And so when David was hired as the Chamber of Commerce executive director, I stalked him until he had a coffee with me, and this beautiful organization was born. I just really wanted to find a way to bolster our small businesses because we have such a sense of community in Englewood, and it's a really special thing. And we're also facing a lot of development, good or bad. And so this was an opportunity for us to be able to shape the community that we would like it to be. So this group is just kind of a group of people who are invested in our community, who have innovative ideas, and who can perhaps carry those forward to execution. So we developed this speaker series in lieu of a big blowout we had planned last June when COVID hit, and we cannot get together yet. And so we figured we would start with the speaker series that just introduces innovative ideas that we could incorporate into our community. So tonight, I am so honored to introduce Chris Casino and Sarah Tracy with the Central Park Conservancy out of New York City. I personally have learned from them for the past 4 or 5 years through numerous trainings, and am so proud to be able to call them good friends as well. Chris is the Director of Program Administration for Central Park Conservancy, and Sarah is the Director of National Programs, and they are a wealth of knowledge and information. Just for everyone on the call and anybody who may be listening to the recording, I am the manager of partnerships and volunteers for Denver Parks and Recreation. So occasionally I chime in because this is my world, but I will kick it off to our speakers to talk about public-private partnerships, specifically for parks tonight, but I think that the three of us can all agree that the tenets of public-private partnerships translate beyond parks and into other areas that could be relevant to Englewood. So with that, I will hand it off to you guys.
Christine, thank you so much. Sarah and I are so honored to be here tonight to talk to each of you about the Central Park Conservancy, our public-private partnership, and this intersection of both private and public entities working in our parks and public spaces, and how the wonderful thing about parks that I've found in almost 2 decades in this work is that parks sit at a nexus of many different facets of our civic life. So both business, sociology, personal and individual health, community building, all come and meet in parks and public spaces. And so this is in part some of the work that Sarah and I do with the Institute. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to give you a little bit of background about the Institute, and then we'll go into some history of both CPC as Christine said, I'm the Director of Program Administration for the Institute. I've been with it since about 2014, working with park organizations and agencies in New York City, across the country, and across the world. And previously, I spent over a decade working in park operations in Central Park. I was both a gardener and then a manager of staff in the southernmost section of the park. So I know a bunch about Central Park. So if you have questions about the park or the park history that you're interested, happy to talk about that as well. And so, Sarah, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sorry. Thank you, Chris. I was going to comment on making sure that you gave that background on yourself because as I mentioned in an email to both of you, traditionally we've been a working class city. And so being able to illustrate that getting your hands dirty and getting things done, I think means a lot to the people who live here. And so I was going to comment on that. And so thank you for giving that background. Sorry.
Excellent.
That's awesome. So, hey, I'm Sarah. I'm our Director of National Programs here at the Institute for Urban Parks. And I just joined the Institute team last summer, actually, even though I was a big fan internally. I would go to all of their, similar to Christine, I would follow us around the country because I was learning so much about this kind of industry, if you will, of urban park management. And prior to that, I was the Conservancy's Director of Corporate Development. So I'm kind of my background is fundraising, but I've really moved over to the Institute team, and it's been such an incredible experience. And so I'll just share with you a little bit about the Institute. So it was, it's part of the Central Park Conservancy. It was established in 2013 with the idea that we could use some of our lessons learned, our expertise to help other parks. I think what we've learned mostly through our programming in the last few years is that this idea of peer-to-peer exchange is just so important. And, we might not know it all, but there's at least one other park out there who probably has an experience similar to yours. So we have a series of programs that are focused on continuing education, peer-to-peer exchange, thought leadership, and capacity building. We're actually this year in one of our programs called the Partnership Lab. The Denver Park Trust is one of our grantees. So we're really excited to be doing some work in Denver this year. And yeah, our programs are really meant to bring urban park managers together so that they can learn from each other, think about the next practices, and really kind of elevate the field of urban park management. And so, yeah, we've been at this work, Chris, a little bit longer than I've been focused on the money, but I'm really excited to be focused a little bit more on the organizations and the capacity. And the other thing I'll just comment on before I turn it back over to Chris is, Chris mentioned, the importance of urban parks and how they work in our cities. And I think, especially because so much of this group's focus is going to be related to the business side of things, what we're really seeing among some of our partners across the country is that parks are now going to be the first draw back to urban centers, which can, have huge benefit to small businesses. And so, real estate, as people think about where they're going to live, we think parks now will be even more elevated in that decision making. So we're really excited to see some of the trends that emerge as a result of the pandemic, now that people have noticed their parks potentially more than ever. So with that, I will hand it back over to Chris.
Thank you, Sarah. And I just want to note too, Christine Adams is an alumni of our Urban Park Leadership Program. She participated in the fall 2018 cohort. So that was, I think, that might have been the first time we met, Christine. So as Sarah was describing, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about what the Central Park Conservancy is, how it came to be. I'm assuming you all have encountered Central Park at some point in your life. Either you may have been there, or you've seen it in an episode of Law and Order, or some film. Many people love, when I worked in the park, everyone wanted to know where the Home Alone 2 bridge was, which I was just astonished that was such a high point in people's memory. But, so Central Park, it's a 19th century park. I often say it's a 19th century park in a 21st century New York City. It was built, the Calvert Vaux and Frederick Law Olmsted created the Greensward Plan design. This was in 1853. It was accepted in 1858. The park starts getting built. Within the first year, people are using part of the park. It's still being built. It's built through the Civil War, completed in around 1873. And then from that point on, this is roughly every 30 to 35 years, the park would go through this kind of pendulum swing of, well cared for maintenance and decline of infrastructure. So by the time you hit the late 19th century, early 20th century, the park's about 30 years old. The infrastructure starts to decay. Some of the trees, the famous, you may have seen photographs of the mall, which is a long straightaway in the southern center of the park with, it's one of the largest remaining stands of American elm trees in North America. The elm, which has been decimated by the Dutch elm disease. So the park has one of the largest remaining collections. That got replanted in the early 20th century. And then as in the advent of things like public recreation and athletics start to take shape, things like baseball, and people start doing these kind of things, the park gets lively again. And the famous figure, Robert Moses, who was the parks commissioner for many years, hugely influential urban space planner. I would say on both sides, you have people that are both detractors of Moses as well as champions. But Central Park, he did many things, including he built things like 18 playgrounds in a period of 2 years' time, expanded the park drives, introduced the automobile into the park. He was a big champion of the American automobile. So the park really thrived from, say, the 20s to through the 50s. And then when you get to the 1960s, as social norms are starting to change, the park is being used for things like public protest for the first time since the early 1900s. Concerts, you may have seen pictures of large concerts in the park during the 1960s. The park is well loved by the citizens of New York. At the same time, people are moving out of New York City, budgets are tightening up in New York City, and the care and maintenance of the park is declining. You hit a point in the 1970s where the New York City fiscal crisis, the city almost goes bankrupt, budgets are decimated, the parks budget is decimated to a point that it's never really recovered here in New York City. New York City has 34,000 acres of park land, and the budget for the NYC Parks, the municipal agency, is only 0.6% of the total city budget. So they are stacked against an incredibly difficult, and they're working in parks that are everything from woodland spaces to beaches of Coney Island to cityscapes and skate parks, and the average New York City park is 73 years old. So it's a huge challenge. And in Central Park, no less, while it's always been an iconographic space for New York City, this was essentially a crown jewel that was in serious decline in the 70s. Infrastructure, and the other big factor was it wasn't safe. So there was over 1,000 major crimes recorded a year in Central Park. So like you may see in your community, and definitely in Denver and many others, there was friends of groups and individuals that were excited about their park and wanted to clean it up. Two of these prominent groups, the Central Park Community Fund and the Central Park Task Force, they came together and they merged and formed the Central Park Conservancy in 1980 with the idea that they would raise private philanthropic dollars and muster volunteer support to start caring for the park and supporting capital restoration projects. So this was done in partnership with the mayor at the time, Mayor Ed Koch, and the Parks Commissioner, a man named Gordon Davis. And our founder is a prominent landscape individual, Elizabeth Barlow Rogers. And the Conservancy very quickly started with small scalable projects that were visible, and things like removing graffiti, picking up trash, fixing lighting and benches, and they established a visitor center out of one of the boarded up buildings in the southern end of the park. But one of the things that they very quickly saw was they turned over some of these projects back to the city, who at the time still was not able to maintain them. This got us involved in starting to build this idea for park maintenance. And they in the mid 80s, they created a master plan called Restoring Central Park, a management and restoration plan. This is something we at the Institute talk a lot about to park groups, big and small. That management really is the key word. The restoration word, while park restoration is often described as sexy for especially politicians who love opening up a new splash pad or a new dog park, if there's not a plan in place in conjunction with the local community supporting it, or the park, if there's not funding given to the Parks Department to maintain it, in a few years' time, all that goodwill can easily zap out of it. And so that, we set about essentially like a 30-year path to start restoring Central Park. That involved kind of going landscape by landscape. Eventually, we started a process of assigning a staff person to a restored landscape. The first one being, we tested out with Strawberry Fields, which if you don't know, Strawberry Fields is a peace garden on the west side of the park, right outside the Dakota apartment building, where John Lennon and Yoko Ono used to live. Yoko donated that to the city. So that was the first space that had our zone, the first zone gardener, where the gardener was responsible for both the horticulture, trash maintenance, and what I describe as essentially like community engagement. So over time, we restored the park spaces, and there is gardeners or groundskeepers attached to each of these spaces. When I first started in the park, I worked at a perennial garden right at the edge of Strawberry Fields. And what I found, what was so powerful about that experience, was I ended up being the front line for the Central Park Conservancy. I met with, everyone from the homeless individuals that would sit on the benches outside of the perennial garden, to donors that would come in through the park, people that were walking to work, people that were walking their dogs, and developed a rapport with them. And it really, it helped both the Conservancy establish itself as this nonprofit that is both supporting the park and the Parks Department. So over time, we definitely evolved. Another, I think, big fact I always like to point out to groups is the Conservancy didn't sign its first agreement with the city until 1998, which is 18 years after the Conservancy started working in Central Park. We did have somewhat of an informal memorandum of understanding, but when you really think about that, things like the Great Lawn, if you've seen pictures of concerts, big concerts in the park, like the Dave Matthews Band or the Global Citizen Festival, the Conservancy restored that at the time. This was from 1994 to 1997. That restoration happened before they signed their agreement with the city. So there really is, we spent a lot of time building public trust and building a relationship with our city partners. You know, that experience at the time, we were one of the early adopters of the public-private partnership model in public space, in park space, right? Like, it's often assumed, and even still to this day, many park organizations we talk to, even ourselves, people aren't really clear on the difference. What we are seeing, though, is this trend that, like, you know, across the country, you know, when you look at the top 100, the largest 100 cities in America, the Trust for Public Land always does a park score ranking every year, and you know, and Denver is in the top quarter of that. Denver has an amazing park system, but you know, at least 2/3 of those cities have multiple public-private partnerships, friends of groups, trusts, alliances supporting their public agencies, public partners in their parks. You know, now, so we now have a contractual agreement with the city of New York. Our most recent one was signed in 2013. The three big things that it does for us is it gives us the administrative authority to manage the day-to-day operations of the park. It spells out our financial agreement with the city. Our agreement currently is we fundraise privately 75% of our annual operating budget. The city contributes 25%. That 25% is derived off of a formula based on the concession revenues in the park. So concessions being restaurants, the boat rental, things like that. And then the big thing is the contract indemnifies us. So if someone gets injured in Central Park and files a lawsuit against the Conservancy and the city represents the Conservancy in court. And I think, you know, I will leave it at that. The one other thing I always like to point out, and Sarah alluded to this, and this is why like peer-to-peer dialogue for us at the Institute is so important, is many groups will come to us wanting like the answers, or they want to copy the Central Park Conservancy's model, right? They want to come in and just they'll say, hey, can you just give us your contract and we'll recreate it. And the one thing I like to say is like every one of these agreements that I've seen is slightly different. It's dependent on your community, on your partner, and the agency that's working in it. And it's worth, you know, it's really important to build up that relationship. Sarah, is there anything that you would add?
No, I think that was an amazing overview. And like you said, you know, we have an incredible fundraising machine at the Conservancy that was developed over time, and how we prioritize, you know, which donor groups we focused on has also definitely been an evolution. So that's, you know, our fundraising is kind of what helps us with our relationship with the city, because we do raise more than a majority of the funds for the park.